I'll get you down.
Okay, I'm just going to read for a few minutes, just enough to set the scene. I have a loud voice. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have a very loud voice. I'm just going to read for a few minutes, just enough to set the scene, and then we'll have a conversation. I did not cause her any harm. This was a great victory for me. At the end of it, I was a changed man. I am indebted to her. It was she who changed me, although I never learned her name. My involvement with the young woman in question began several years ago, in the late summer of 1974, while I was on leave from the university. I sought to secure for myself a small office in the downtown business district of San Francisco, where I intended to prepare a series of lectures about the humanities, the kindly ones, the third play in Aeschylus's great trilogy. A limited budget brought me to the edge of a rough, depressed neighborhood, and my first sighting of the prospective office building, 8 begrimed gargoyles crouched beneath the parapet, their eyes eaten away by time, nearly caused me to retrace my steps. Yet there was no question of my turning back. Immediately upon my arrival in San Francisco, a month earlier, a great gloom had descended upon me. I had arranged my leave in great haste. I knew no one in the area, and it must have been this isolation that had engendered in me a particularly obdurate spell of the nervous condition to which I had been subject since boyhood. Although I was then a grown man of 50 years, the illness, as ever, cast me back into the dark emotions of my pre-adolescence, as if I remained unchanged, the desperate boy of 12 I had been. Indeed, the very purpose of the office was to act as a counterweight to this most recent spell, to get me dressed and out of the house, to force me to walk on public streets among people, to immerse myself, however anonymously, in the general hum of society, and in this way, perhaps, sustain the gestures of normal life. So I'll move on. The building turns out to be very weird inside. The office he's shown is small and battered. I'll give you one detail about what he sees when he walks in. There were what he thought was 3 cherubs floating above the elevators, their eyes of black onyx, which, as I watched in fright, appeared to be moving. It took some moments to understand what hung before me. Elevator floor indicators in the form of bronze cherubs, their eyes circling to watch the floor numbers as the cars rose and fell. So I'll give you some idea of the appearance of this place. His office is on the 8th floor, and he finds the rumble of the traffic below him very soothing and restorative, and he makes some progress on his lectures. Then, shortly after Labor Day, as I sat down to draft the first talk in the series, I found that the acoustical qualities of the office, previously so regenerative, had abruptly changed. Cutting through the pleasant social drone from the streets below, superseding it in both pitch and constancy, was an odd whirring sound, like wind rushing through a keyhole, and just audible above the whir, coming in uneven and therefore intrusive intervals, was a speaking voice, but only its sibilants and dentalizations, only the tongue and teeth, as it were. I am certain it was only the general darkness of my mood, but I felt there was something mocking and threatening in the sibilance, for the sound drew me to it the way a cat is lured pss, pss, for drowning. He jumps up. He's determined to find the source of this noise. He goes to the office to his right. It says consulting engineers. He doesn't hear anything. And then he comes to the office. I guess that was the left. This one's on the right. Number 804. As I drew closer, the whir became unmistakable, as did the voice. There was no glass panel in this door. Its gold letters simply read, Dora Schussler, Ph.D. And as he stands there, he realizes that the whir is a therapist's white noise machine. And he finds that it's an evil joke that he's a neighbor to such an enterprise, because he's been in therapy all his life to no avail. And he says he is still battling the hooded view of life that has haunted his family for generations. He resolves he's going to move, saying, I would accept another office on another floor, pursuing any avenue to get away from this therapist, counselor, psychoanalyst, whatever she wished to call herself. I was about to look for the building manager, demand he placed me in a different room. when suddenly everything went quiet. It was the whir of the sound machine abruptly stopped. In its absence was a stillness so crisp that I could hear the suggestive, teasing slip sound of a single tissue being withdrawn from a Kleenex box. Then a voice which said, "Thanks, you know I hate that thing." And a reply, "So sorry, I do forget." I was so startled by the clarity of the sounds coming from the next room. I could hear a sigh, an intake of breath, the lifting of a haunch, indeed to the extent that I knew with utter certainty that both client and analyst sat upon leather, that I could not move for several seconds. What was I to do about this sudden forced intimacy? Perhaps I should have coughed or jostled the door so that they, hearing me, would know the extent to which I was hearing them. Yet I sat still. And in a brief instant, through some quirk of reasoning, no doubt related to the gently twisted logic of my mood, I convinced myself that my making noise would be an imposition upon them, that my presence would inhibit them, and the only way for analyst and analysand to continue their work undisturbed was for me to keep my existence a secret. And that sets the scene.